A terrified boy runs up to a cop, tears streaming down his face. "She's not my real mom," he cries. What happens next will uncover a chilling secret that's been hidden for years. The streetlights flickered above as 10-year-old Jackson Crawford ran barefoot down the quiet sidewalks of Atlanta. His chest heaved with each ragged breath, his thin pajamas clinging to his small frame, damp with sweat and dirt. His feet ached from the cold pavement, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. His heart pounded like a drum in his ears, drowning out the distant hum of the city. Tears blurred his vision as he turned a corner, nearly stumbling. He glanced back once, just once, to make sure she wasn't following him. His stomach twisted at the thought of her finding him. Rebecca. The woman who had raised him. The woman who had lied. A police officer stood a few feet away, leaning against his cruiser, sipping a cup of coffee. Officer Clayton Burrows was nearing the end of his shift, the exhaustion weighing on him. But when he spotted the boy, shoeless, shaking, and clearly terrified, every trace of fatigue vanished. "Hey, kid, you okay?" he asked, setting his coffee on the hood of the car. His voice was calm but firm, the way only a seasoned cop could manage. Jackson skidded to a halt, his whole body trembling. He looked up at the officer, eyes wide with fear. For a second, he hesitated, his breathing uneven, his small hands clenched into fists at his sides. Then, his voice cracked as he blurted out the words that made Clayton's blood run cold. "She's not my real mom." Clayton's brows furrowed. "What do you mean, son?" Jackson shook his head frantically. She stole me. I don't belong to her." His chest rose and fell rapidly, panic overtaking him. "Please, don't let her take me back." Clayton's instincts kicked in. He reached for his radio, his tone now urgent. "This is Officer Burrows. I have a child in distress. Possible abduction case. Requesting immediate backup." As he spoke, he kept his eyes on the boy, who was still shaking, his lips pale, his whole body screaming for help. In the distance, sirens wailed. Jackson flinched. And at that moment, Clayton knew, this was just the beginning. Inside the police station, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over the gray-walled room. Jackson Crawford sat on a worn leather chair, his legs swinging nervously under the table. A thin emergency blanket was draped over his shoulders, but he still shivered, whether from cold or fear, even he wasn't sure. His small hands clutched a styrofoam cup of hot chocolate that Officer Clayton Burrows had given him. He hadn't taken a sip. Across from him, Clayton observed the boy closely. He had dealt with lost kids before, runaways, abandoned children, even kidnapping victims, but something about Jackson was different. The way his fingers gripped the cup too tightly, the way his wide, dark eyes flicked to the door every few seconds as if expecting someone to burst in and take him away. "Jackson," Clayton said gently, leaning forward, "I need you to tell me everything. From the beginning. How long have you been with her?" Jackson's breath hitched. His throat tightened. He wanted to tell the officer everything, about the lies, the strange memories that didn't fit, the feeling deep in his gut that told him he didn't belong in that house, but the words got caught somewhere inside him. Before he could answer, the station doors burst open with a force that made Jackson flinch. "Where is he?" a woman's voice rang through the room, sharp and frantic. Rebecca Hale stormed inside, her blonde hair disheveled, her face red from either crying or anger. She was wearing a thin cardigan over her dress, as if she had left her house in a hurry. Her blue eyes darted around the room until they landed on Jackson, and in an instant, her expression shifted. "There you are, sweetheart," she said, forcing a smile as she rushed toward him. "Oh, my God, you had me so scared. Why did you run off like that?" Jackson froze, his fingers gripping the edge of the chair. His body screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. Clayton stepped between them, holding up a hand. "Ma'am, I need you to take a step back." Rebecca's eyes flashed with something dark before she quickly masked it. Step back. Officer, I'm his mother. He must be confused, he sleepwalks sometimes, and I think he must have wandered off. I was terrified when I woke up and saw his bed empty. Clayton didn't budge. He had dealt with too many liars in his years as a cop not to recognize one when he saw one. He turned to Jackson. Do you want to go home with her? He asked carefully. Jackson's breath came in short, quick gasps. He stared at the floor, too afraid to look at Rebecca. His lips parted, but no words came out. Rebecca's voice softened, dripping with false concern. Honey, it's okay. Just tell them the truth. But Jackson didn't speak. He couldn't. Clayton turned back to Rebecca. Ma'am, we're going to need to ask you some questions. Jackson has made some serious allegations, and we need to make sure everything checks out. Rebecca's forced smile faltered. Allegations? What are you talking about? She let out a nervous laugh, but her eyes darted around, calculating. This is ridiculous. He's just a child. Kids make up stories all the time. Clayton didn't respond. Instead, he nodded toward one of the other officers. Take her to an interview room. We'll need to verify some things. Rebecca's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. Not yet. She threw one last look at Jackson before following the officer out of the room. The moment she was gone, Jackson let out a shaky breath, his whole body trembling. Clayton crouched down to his level. You're safe now, kid. But I need you to help me understand, why do you think she's not your real mom? Jackson hesitated. Then, in a small, broken voice, he whispered. Because I remember someone else. Jackson sat stiffly in the small interview room, his fingers gripping the edge of the chair. The emergency blanket draped over his shoulders felt heavy now, as if it were holding him down. His stomach twisted with an ache he couldn't explain, a deep, hollow feeling that had been there for as long as he could remember. Officer Clayton Burrows sat across from him, his notepad open, though he hadn't written anything down yet. His expression was calm, patient, but Jackson could feel his sharp gaze studying him, waiting. You said you remember someone else, Clayton prompted gently. Can you tell me what you mean? Jackson swallowed hard. His hands clenched into fists on his lap. He didn't want to say it out loud. Saying it made it real. But the truth was already bubbling up inside him, and he couldn't push it down any longer. I have dreams, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But they don't feel like dreams. They feel real. Clayton nodded. What do you see in these dreams? Jackson hesitated, his fingers tightening around the blanket. He took a shaky breath and forced himself to speak. A woman, he said. She has yellow hair, like the sun. And her voice, it's soft. Warm. She sings to me sometimes, but I don't know the words. His brows furrowed. And she calls me a different name. Clayton leaned forward slightly. What name? Jackson's throat tightened. The name echoed in his mind, distant yet familiar, like a memory buried under years of dust. She calls me Mikey, he whispered. A heavy silence filled the room. Clayton didn't speak right away, and when Jackson finally lifted his eyes, he saw something in the officer's face, something shifting, calculating. Jackson, Clayton said carefully, has Rebecca ever called you that name? Jackson shook his head. No. I told her about the dreams once, but she got really mad. She said I was imagining things and that my name is Jackson Hale. But. He hesitated, voice breaking. It doesn't feel right. It never has. Clayton tapped his pen against the notepad, his mind working fast. This wasn't just a case of a confused child. Something was deeply wrong here. Did Rebecca ever show you baby pictures of yourself? Clayton asked, watching Jackson's face closely. Jackson hesitated. He'd never really thought about that before. No, he admitted. There are pictures of me when I was really little, but they all look the same. Like they were taken around the same time. I don't remember seeing any pictures of me as a baby. Clayton's jaw tightened. That was odd. Most parents had stacks of baby pictures, old hospital bracelets, birth certificates proudly displayed in folders. Jackson suddenly sat up straighter, his eyes wide as another memory surfaced. There was a box, he blurted out. In her closet. She thought I didn't see it, but I did. I looked inside once when she was gone. Clayton's pulse quickened. What was in the box, Jackson? The boy swallowed, shifting uncomfortably. A bracelet. It was really small, like for a baby. It had letters on it, but I didn't understand them. And there was a newspaper, but I only saw part of it before she came home. She got really mad when she saw me holding it. She grabbed it and told me never to go through her stuff again. Clayton kept his face neutral, but inside, his instincts screamed at him. A hospital bracelet? A newspaper? This was bigger than he had thought. Jackson, he said, his voice steady, do you remember what the newspaper said? Jackson frowned, trying to recall. It was a blurry, faded memory, but one word stood out. Missing, he said. I think it said, missing. Clayton's chest tightened. He reached for his radio, his tone sharp. This is Officer Burroughs, he said. I need a background check on a Rebecca Hale, ASAP. And cross-reference any child abduction cases from about 7 years ago. Jackson's eyes darted to him, confusion and fear flashing across his face. Officer Burroughs, am I really Jackson? Clayton looked at the boy, this small, scared child whose entire life might have been built on a lie. I don't know yet, kid, he said honestly. But we're going to find out. Hours passed in a tense, suffocating silence. Jackson sat in a corner of the police station, curled up in the chair with the emergency blanket still wrapped around him. The hot chocolate on the table had gone cold, untouched. He stared at the floor, his mind buzzing with questions he didn't know how to answer. Was his name really Jackson? Had Rebecca been lying to him his entire life? And if so, who was the woman from his dreams? Across the room, Officer Clayton Burroughs stood by his desk, speaking in a hushed but urgent tone into his phone. His face was grim, his fingers gripping the receiver just a little too tight. Then it happened. A notification popped up on Clayton's screen. His entire body tensed as he read it. He barely breathed, his eyes scanning the words over and over again, making sure he wasn't seeing things. His heart pounded as he hung up the phone and turned toward the boy. Jackson, he called, his voice lower than usual. I need you to come here. Jackson hesitated before slowly getting up and walking toward the desk. His feet felt heavy, like he was dragging stones behind him. Clayton crouched down so they were at eye level. He took a deep breath before speaking. Jackson. I think I know who you are. The boy's stomach twisted. He didn't know if he wanted to hear the answer. Clayton turned his computer screen slightly, showing a web page, a missing persons database. And there, staring back at them, was an old photo of a toddler. A chubby-cheeked boy, barely 3 years old, with big brown eyes and a wide, innocent smile. Below the picture was a name. Michael Farrow. Jackson's breath caught in his throat. His fingers dug into the fabric of the blanket as he read the name again. Michael. Not Jackson. Michael. Clayton's voice was gentle but firm. Jackson, Michael, this boy went missing 7 years ago from a park in Tennessee. His parents, Hannah and Gavin Farrow, have been looking for him ever since. Jackson's whole body felt numb. That's not me, he whispered, shaking his head. It can't be. Clayton's expression didn't change. The records say Michael was wearing a hospital bracelet with his initials on it when he disappeared. He paused. You told me Rebecca had a baby bracelet in a box, didn't you? Jackson felt his breath hitch. It couldn't be true. He had always been Jackson Hale. That's what Rebecca told him. That's what his teachers called him, what his school ID said. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered, "You always knew something wasn't right." Clayton continued, his voice steady but serious. "We need to do a DNA test to be sure. But, kid, I think you're Michael Farrow. And I think Rebecca Hale took you." The room felt like it was spinning. Jackson squeezed his eyes shut, his fingers gripping the edges of the desk. "What if I don't remember them?" he whispered. "What if I don't remember my real parents?" Clayton placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "That doesn't mean they don't remember you." Tears welled up in Jackson's, Michael's, eyes. His entire world had just cracked open, and he had no idea what was on the other side. But one thing was clear. Rebecca wasn't his mother. And for the first time in his life, he didn't know who he really was. Rebecca Hale sat in the dimly lit interrogation room, her hands cuffed to the metal table. The fluorescent light above her flickered slightly, casting sharp shadows across her pale face. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She just sat there, staring at the wall, her jaw tight, her fingers twitching against the cold steel of the handcuffs. Officer Clayton Burroughs stood on the other side of the one-way glass, watching her carefully. He had seen criminals react in many ways: denial, rage, panic. But Rebecca? She was waiting. Calculating. "Is she saying anything?" Detective Mara Ellison asked as she stepped up beside Clayton. "Not yet," he muttered. "But she will." Ellison studied the woman through the glass. She took that boy and raised him as her own. Lied to him for years. You think she's going to admit to it that easily? Clayton exhaled sharply. "I don't need her to admit it. We already have enough." The DNA test had been rushed. Less than 20 minutes ago, the results had come in. A perfect match. The boy in the other room wasn't Jackson Hale. He was Michael Farrow, the missing child who had been ripped away from his family 7 years ago. Clayton clenched his jaw. He had to be careful how he approached this. With a nod to Ellison, he pushed open the heavy metal door and stepped into the interrogation room. Rebecca's eyes flicked up to meet his. "Officer Burroughs," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Have you come to tell me this is all a big mistake?" Clayton pulled out a chair and sat across from her. He placed a thick file on the table between them and slowly opened it. Inside were crime scene photos, the missing persons report, and, most damning of all, the DNA results. He slid the paper across the table toward her. "His name is Michael Farrow," he said. "Not Jackson. Michael. And you stole him." Rebecca's lips parted, and for a split second, just a flicker of a moment, Clayton saw something in her eyes. Fear. But then she straightened her shoulders and gave a soft chuckle. "DNA tests aren't perfect, officer. You can't trust every piece of paper the government hands you." Clayton leaned forward. "I don't need the DNA test to tell me what I already know. You lied to that boy. You raised him as your own, knowing he had a real family out there looking for him." Rebecca's fingers twitched again, but she shook her head. "I saved him." Clayton's stomach twisted. He had heard excuses before, but this was something different. Rebecca leaned forward, her voice lowering. "Do you have any idea what happens to unwanted children, Officer Burroughs?" He was alone. He was abandoned. Her eyes darkened. "I gave him a home. I gave him love. And now you want to take that away?" Clayton's grip tightened on the edge of the table. "He wasn't abandoned," he snapped. "He was stolen." Rebecca's eyes flashed. He doesn't even remember them, she hissed. What kind of parents lose a child in a park? He was meant to be mine. Clayton forced himself to take a slow breath. You're right about one thing, he said. He doesn't remember them. But they remember him. And they never stopped looking. Rebecca's expression faltered. Clayton stood up. I hope it was worth it, Rebecca. Because you're never going to see him again. He turned and knocked on the door. The guard outside immediately stepped in, ready to escort her to booking. As they pulled her to her feet, Rebecca suddenly thrashed. You can't do this, she screamed. You'll ruin him. He's mine. He's my son. Her voice echoed down the halls as they dragged her away, but Clayton didn't look back. He had a scared little boy in the other room who had just lost everything he thought was real. And now, he had to figure out how to tell him the truth. Michael sat in the small room, his knees pulled to his chest, staring at the blank wall in front of him. The emergency blanket Officer Burroughs had given him earlier was still wrapped around his shoulders, but it didn't stop the cold creeping through his body. It wasn't the kind of cold that came from outside, it was the kind that settled deep inside, the kind that no amount of warmth could chase away. His name wasn't Jackson Hale. He wasn't who he thought he was. And the woman he had spent his whole life calling Mom was a liar. A criminal. His fingers dug into his arms as he squeezed his eyes shut. He could hear the faint hum of voices outside the door, officers talking, phones ringing, the steady rhythm of a world that somehow kept moving even though his had completely fallen apart. Then, the door opened with a quiet creak. Michael flinched slightly but didn't look up. Officer Burroughs stepped inside, his usual firm, commanding presence softened by something else, concern. In his hands, he held a small photograph. Hey, kid, Clayton said, his voice low. How you holding up? Michael shrugged. He didn't trust his voice right now. Clayton let out a slow breath before moving to the chair across from him. He placed the photo on the table, sliding it forward just enough for Michael to see. Curiosity flickered through the numbness in his chest. Slowly, hesitantly, he looked down. A man and a woman stood side by side, both smiling softly at the camera. The woman had golden blonde hair, the same color as the woman in his dreams. The man had dark brown eyes, kind but heavy with something else. Grief. They're your parents, Clayton said gently. Hannah and Gavin Farrow. They've been looking for you for 7 years. Michael swallowed hard, his throat dry. He traced his finger over the photo, as if touching it would help the memories surface. He wanted to remember them. He really did. But when he tried, all he saw was static, blurry fragments that didn't quite fit. I don't know them, he admitted quietly. Clayton nodded, as if he had expected that. That's okay, he assured him. You don't have to remember right away. But they remember you. Michael stared at the photo again. His heart twisted painfully. Rebecca had told him his entire life that he was Jackson Hale, that he had no other family, that she was the only person in the world who would ever love him. Had that all been a lie? Had his real parents loved him? Had they missed him? Tears burned at the corners of his eyes, but he quickly blinked them away. What if? He hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. What if I don't belong with them anymore? Clayton's expression softened. You don't have to have all the answers right now, kid. But you do deserve to know the truth. And you deserve to meet them. Michael's fingers curled into the fabric of the blanket. Meet them. The idea made his stomach churn. Would they be disappointed? Would they be angry that he had forgotten them? That he had spent years calling someone else Mom? As if reading his mind, Clayton leaned forward. They just want to see you, Michael. That's all. No pressure. No expectations. Just a chance to know their son again. Michael's heart pounded in his chest. Their son. He didn't know if he was ready. But a part of him, the part that had spent so many nights staring at the ceiling, feeling like something was missing, wanted to try. Slowly, he gave a small nod. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll meet them." Clayton offered a reassuring smile. "You're braver than you think, kid." Michael wasn't sure if that was true. But tomorrow, he was going to meet the people who had been waiting for him for 7 years. And nothing would ever be the same again. Michael sat in the back of the police cruiser, his hands folded tightly in his lap. His stomach twisted with nerves as he stared out the window, watching the city blur past. The world outside looked the same as it had yesterday: cars, sidewalks, people going about their lives. But everything inside him felt different. Officer Clayton Burrows sat in the driver's seat, silent but alert. He had offered to ride with Michael to meet his parents, knowing this wasn't going to be easy. Michael's fingers curled into his sleeves. "What if they don't like me?" Clayton glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "That's not possible, kid. They've been waiting for this moment for years." Michael swallowed hard. He wanted to believe that. But the truth was, he didn't know these people. And they didn't know him. What if they expected him to be someone else? The car pulled into a parking lot beside a small, quiet building. It wasn't a police station, but it wasn't a home either. A neutral place for difficult reunions. Michael felt his pulse quicken as he spotted them through the large front window. A man and a woman sat together on a couch, their hands clasped tightly, as if holding onto each other for strength. The woman, Hannah Farrow, had golden blonde hair, just like in his dreams. But now it wasn't just a blurry face in the back of his mind. She was real. The man, Gavin Farrow, looked nervous. His dark brown eyes darted toward the window, searching, waiting. Michael felt like his entire body had turned to stone. He couldn't move. Clayton shut off the engine. "Take your time," he said gently. But time wasn't the problem. It was fear. Michael wasn't sure what he had expected, but as soon as the doors opened and he stepped inside, Hannah gasped, a sharp, breathless sound that made his heart ache. Tears welled up in her eyes as she lifted a trembling hand to her mouth. Gavin's grip on her hand tightened, his chest rising and falling unevenly. "Michael," she whispered. He flinched at the name. It still felt strange. Hannah took a hesitant step forward, but then she stopped, her hands shaking. I'm sorry, I don't want to scare you," she said quickly. "You don't have to come closer. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for." Michael stared at her, unsure what to say. There was something in her eyes, something deep, something raw. Love. Pain. Loss. Hope. He didn't remember her, but something in his chest ached at the sight of her. Gavin's voice broke the silence. "We missed you, buddy," he said, his voice thick. "We never stopped looking." Michael's throat tightened. He wasn't sure why, but his eyes burned with tears. Hannah smiled through her tears. I know this must be really confusing for you," she said. "And I don't expect you to remember us. But you're our son, and we love you, no matter what." Michael swallowed hard. He wanted to say something, but the words got stuck. He looked down at his hands, feeling small, feeling lost. Then, Hannah hesitated before reaching into her bag. "I brought something," she said softly. "I don't know if you'll remember it, but..." She pulled out a small, worn-out stuffed dog. Its fur was faded, its ears floppy from years of being held too tightly. Michael's breath caught. Something flickered in the back of his mind, a memory, faint but there. Holding that stuffed animal in his tiny hands. Pressing it against his cheek when he was scared. A soft voice telling him, "Mikey, don't be afraid. I'll always be here." His fingers twitched. Without thinking, he reached for the toy. His hands trembled as he took it, running his fingers over the worn fabric. His chest ached. He knew this toy. Hannah let out a quiet sob, covering her mouth with her hand. Gavin exhaled shakily, his eyes glistening. Michael stared at the stuffed dog, his heart pounding. He didn't remember everything. But for the first time, something felt right. And for the first time since this nightmare began. He didn't feel so lost. The next few weeks were a blur. Michael, because that was his name now, whether it felt right or not, was placed in temporary care while the legal process unfolded. He wasn't going back to Rebecca. She was in jail, facing charges that would keep her there for a long time. That part was final. But what wasn't final, what was still a storm of confusion inside him, was where he belonged. Hannah and Gavin visited him every day. They never pushed. They never forced him to talk about things he wasn't ready to say. They just showed up. Brought him books, his favorite snacks, even an old family photo album, one that was supposed to be filled with memories he should have remembered but didn't. Michael would sit with them, flipping through the pages, staring at pictures of a little boy with chubby cheeks and a toothy grin. That little boy was him. But he didn't feel like that boy anymore. One night, he sat alone in his temporary room, staring at the ceiling, his stuffed dog clutched tightly in his hands. The same dog Hannah had given him during their first meeting. The one that had sparked something in him, a memory, a feeling. He wasn't sure why, but that toy made him feel safe. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Come in," he said, his voice quiet. The door creaked open, and Hannah stepped inside. She was wearing a cozy sweater, her hair pulled up in a messy bun. She looked nervous, as if she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be here. "I just wanted to check on you," she said softly. "I can leave if you want." Michael hesitated before shaking his head. "You can stay." Hannah smiled, stepping inside and sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. They sat in silence for a moment. Then, Michael finally spoke. "Do you still love me?" he asked suddenly, his fingers tightening around the stuffed animal. Hannah's breath hitched. Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled, a warm, gentle smile that felt like home. "More than anything," she whispered. Michael looked down, his throat tight. "But what if I'm not the same kid you lost?" he asked. "What if I'm different now?" Hannah reached out, hesitating for just a moment before gently brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "You are different," she said. "You've been through so much. But that doesn't change the fact that you're our son. It doesn't change how much we love you." Michael swallowed hard. For years, he had believed that Rebecca was the only person who had ever loved him. But that had been a lie. His real parents had never stopped loving him. They had never stopped searching for him. His chest ached with something he couldn't name. Hannah must have noticed because she gave a small, hopeful smile. "You don't have to call us Mom and Dad," she said softly. "Not until you're ready. You don't have to rush anything. We'll wait for you, Michael. However long it takes." Michael stared at her, something shifting inside him. And for the first time, he let himself believe it. He wasn't alone anymore. Maybe he wasn't ready to call them Mom and Dad just yet. But someday, maybe he would be. And for now, that was enough. This story is about loss, identity, and the long road to healing. It's about a boy who had his entire world turned upside down, forced to question everything he thought was real. But at its core, it's also a story about love, the kind that never gives up, never fades, and never stops searching. Michael's journey isn't just about discovering who he really is, it's about learning to trust again, to open his heart to the people who never stopped loving him, even when he couldn't remember them. His trauma won't disappear overnight, and the scars of his past will stay with him, but he's no longer alone. What makes this ending powerful is that it's not a perfect fairy tale. Michael doesn't instantly feel like he belongs, and he doesn't immediately call his parents mom and dad. That kind of healing takes time. But what matters is that he has a choice now, a choice that was stolen from him for years. This is a story of hope, the hope that even after years of pain and confusion, love can still find its way back. And maybe, just maybe, Michael will finally feel at home again.